Ladies and gentlemen, since we last met on this platform of Recovery Townhall series, the world's 7.8 billion people bid a hearty farewell to 2020 and a pandemic-weary world welcomed 2021. However, the ghost of 2020 still lingers on and making 2021 the year of great acceptance of the unprecedented losses, most significantly in travel and tourism. Every year, travel trends come and go. Indeed, 2021 is said to be one of tourism's most significant years to date of hope and recovery. As the world slowly recovers from COVID 19 and borders gradually start to open, we expect travel to look a little different than it did pre pandemic. Perhaps, dare we say, ushering in an era of changed dynamics. In order to explore this new normal, we kick off our second season of Recovery Town Hall series. It is my great honor to invite our special guest today, Mr. Dr. Taleb Rifai, who requires no introduction as our newest Secretary General of the World Tourism Forum Institute, where he will be focused on presenting his next 10 years tourism agenda and vision for a post-COVID recovery towards rebuilding a new tourism world order as a catalyst for economic development and change, one of hope and resilience with no country left behind. Welcome, Dr. Taleb Rifai.
Thank you so much, Sumaira. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be there with you.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
Dr. Taleb, 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year for the travel and tourism industry, with the virus outbreak reaching all countries and causing unprecedented levels of restrictive measures. The second spike, and perhaps even a third in some cases in Europe and North America, has subdued the momentum at the start of the year, with global international travel demand estimated to decline by 73% in 2020 and a 34% drop expected for domestic travel. Has tourism as we knew it changed forever? Will the old system be broken and not work anymore? What is your outlook?
Okay. The new outlook for tourism is going to be different. We have a new norm now in the making. Now, 2021 is the beginning of the change, for sure. It's not going to change everything. The problem here, Sumaira, is that we are working with each government independently. Each government is working on its own, making the best judgment that it can. Until the international system works together, we rebuild the international system. Until that happens, there is no way we can progress. For example, a traveler would not go to Dubai and then from there find a different way of going to Turkey or Germany or to Spain or to the East. You have to unify this. Governments are still working independently, unfortunately. The international system needs to come together. That's one of the reasons why I was very excited about joining the World Travel Forum Institute, because it's a way of bringing countries together. Governments must learn how to work together. It's more important than what we do, is how you do it. That's my point.
So your work is not yet done. I think it needs leadership here, and here we are
definitely
together and joining hands. So a recent Expedia group study, which surveyed 11,000 travelers across 11 countries on intent to travel in 2021, also showed that the majority are more likely to travel after April 2021, with North America, Europe, Middle East, and African travelers showing increased intent starting only in Q3 of 2021. What is your prediction when we will see an earnest return to the skies?
I think 2021 will see a change of this trend, but it will not see a full recovery, for sure, because travelers are going to travel from one destination to another, point to point. They're not going to take any intermediate joint in between. They're traveling by airlines. And until these countries make agreements with each other, that what you need to do, for example, is testing 72 hours before you arrive to a place. That's one thing. No quarantines, because if there is quarantines, there's a problem. So on and so forth. There are little details that have to be sorted out. They are being sorted out now. Because for a change now, the world has come to realize the value of the tourism. Travel and tourism today is not just anymore just a luxury activity. It's a human activity. It's people-to-people activity. That's why we are
very, very key.
Yeah. So that's why we need to make sure that we create these corridors, very valuable corridors. Otherwise, we'll not get any numbers. But this is the year of recovery for sure. Because as I always say, I believe there is an opportunity coming out of each crisis. Just like the Chinese say, the word crisis and the word opportunity are one word in China. That's a very, very important thing. It's the beginning of the change, but the change is not going to be completed in 2021. And I do agree that there will be some travel, but we're talking only about international travel. We're dismissing domestic travel, which is very, very important here. We haven't even calculated it yet. We didn't get a chance to regulate it and calculate it. Domestic travel is very, very important. One of the lessons that came out of this crisis, the importance of domestic tourism. You know, in the UK and in Europe, 75% of travel is domestic.
And there is all this talk about having this special post-pandemic passport, a health passport, or that people have to carry there. Do you think that's the future?
I think that's part of it, but this is all just related to the vaccine. The vaccine is to be proven itself only when most of the people of the world have vaccinated, and it has proven to be successful. Will vaccination be taken seriously?
Right.
Testing, I think, is more important nowadays. Testing, we should test. Right. We should test easier, cheaper, and faster.
Which, the vaccine distribution rollout will define the recovery profile in 2021 and beyond, for sure, right?
That's right.
Boost the travel confidence. Surveys point to significant pent-up demand, which will begin to be realized once restrictions are eased. But then most recent controversies of lack of effectiveness, as well as rumors of shortages of the vaccine, has marred the early few weeks of positive sentiment. Do you see light at the end of the tunnel here?
I'm very optimistic, yes, but not necessarily about the vaccine per se.
I think that these countries
the vaccine can have its ups and downs.
But do you think these countries will get it right? Will because
I think eventually they will. Eventually they will, but it's not going to. People don't trust the vaccine yet. Yeah. There's a problem of trust and confidence in the vaccine. We haven't seen the results of it, the effect on the society.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying testing nowadays is by far much more important to me than vaccine. Testing will make our recovery faster now. Right. We have to improve our testing abilities, PCR, make it faster, make it easier, make it cheaper for people to test.
And make it free. There are countries which are still charging for these tests. It's sad.
That's right. That's right.
This is, I think, human right of it's a civil right of all nationalities and citizens of countries, to have this test done for free. And it's sad to see some countries are still charging.
Definitely.
Yeah. So just touching on travel part, holiday flights within Europe are on the move again, with passengers sitting tight, close together. According to an opinion poll by International Air Transport Association, 62% of those questioned are afraid of being infected by passengers in the next seat. This was identified by IATA as the main reason for the decline in willingness to travel, which is now only 45%. And on top of that, the economic income and job loss impacts will reduce expenditure. Travelers will choose closer to home destinations, which is what you are referring to, the domestic tourism. So the model shift from air to drive travel will perhaps become a feature in 2021. International travel perhaps will have a slow path to normalization, below crisis levels until 2024. So what do you think is the future of airline recoveries in such a scenario?
Airline would recover as fast as governments will work together, because the private sector now is so dependent on governments. Governments have to unify their regulations first and make it easier. Air France cannot travel to Africa under one condition, travel to the United States under a different condition, travel to China under a different condition altogether. It has to be a unified one. So that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is recovery will be as fast as government learn the lesson to work together.
Mm-hmm.
You have to unify that. Whether it's the passport, whether it's a vaccine, or whether it's the testing.
So
But we need to have one system.
Governments continue to subsidize some of these airlines because they are just falling, and some of them
That's a must.
more
That's a
mergers.
must anyhow. That's a must anyhow. I mean, subsidies are a must for recovery. Recovery has 3 phases. Phase number 1 is keeping businesses alive.
Right.
That can only happen by subsidization. Secondly, is to go into domestic and regional tourism. Thirdly, is to go to international tourism. We can't jump to international tourism all of a sudden like this. The current structures of businesses are not very prepared to handle new things. People want to stay alive now. That's why I'm saying that domestic tourism can help businesses stay alive, at least. I know domestic tourism is not as good as international in terms of money exchange, in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of trade balance. But it does keep businesses alive and does keep the jobs
It can
ongoing.
be that the domestic tourism can be that rice between the caviar till we return
That's right.
to that
That's right.
situation of foreign
That's
exchange.
right. That's
Yeah.
That's right. Before we go into international tourism.
So, according to some data, if the vaccine rollouts continue and the world gets more accustomed to safety measures, there are high hopes that over 100 million jobs in travel and tourism could be recovered in 2021. They're still not the levels we were at, in 2019. But do you think this is an optimistic forecast, or do you think there's a real chance for that to happen?
No, it's a real chance for that. Look at China, for example. China has been able to recover, not just in the medical term, even in the tourism term and the travel term, because they have a huge domestic market. And they opened up that market. They still have restrictions on in and out, but they are able to recover very well. And the jobs and the hotels occupancy is still very high. So I think, yes, there is a chance.
So it can be done.
It can be done, of course. Of course.
You need political will. You need governments
Yes.
to step up their
You need
game.
Yes. And you need the international multilateral system to work better way. Today, nowadays, look at the EU. Even the EU is not able to bring one regulation for countries to work together. I'm in south of Spain now. South of Spain is acting on its own even. Even central government of Spain is not able to introduce any measures, let alone Spain versus France versus Italy, and so on and so forth.
And
the UK, for example.
So you believe no country can do it alone?
No, it's not going
to. We are in this together.
Well, they can do it alone if they're talking about containing the disease. But if we're talking about travel and tourism is a very interconnected activity. It can never happen unless there is.
That also includes business travel, right?
Of course.
People, even if they are not traveling for leisure, you have to travel for business. So at some point, that connectivity takes place.
That's right. The whole activity of travel is interconnected, nations and governments together. And unless governments realize that they need to rebuild the multilateral system, the EU's voice is not heard. The UN voice is not heard altogether. That's my real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm hoping that the World Travel Forum Institute would do together.
Right.
Bring the governments of the world together and make them realize that unless they work together, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter what you do, it's how you do it. Again.
And from your experience, from your past experience, that in just UN WTO for that matter, the UK and the US, these were the two main countries which had less participation, overall. So it's important that these big countries take the lead, do you think, or it's everybody's responsibility?
It's everybody's responsibility, but these big countries have always been leaders in all of this. That's why we always missed them when we were at UNWTO. The UK and the US. China is a very important player here.
Right.
Because China introduces 150 million travelers from China.
Right.
They have been zero now in the last few months. Nobody's traveling outside of China because the Chinese government doesn't want to take any risk sending its people and coming back infected. So we need to work with China. We need to work with the US. We need to work with the UK. We need to work with Spain, with France, Germany, Sweden, all the Scandinavian, all the source markets. People
Best
will travel more.
practices will come out of these countries, right?
Yes.
That is what can be rolled out to poor nations.
Exactly.
So, which brings me to my next point. International travel to Europe has been downgraded to an estimated 69% in 2020, including a 75% drop for emerging Europe. Meanwhile, the Americas have suffered with a drop of 73% in international arrivals, remaining below 2019 levels until 2025. Perhaps even further, because the situation just keeps on deteriorating in US. Countries in Asia Pacific have remained largely closed to international visitors, therefore record the greatest decline in international arrivals of all regions at 83%. And travel restrictions have been tight all across Middle East. Dubai, of course, had started opening up, but again, we are seeing lockdowns in Oman, Qatar, as well as Dubai, has been declared the red zone of the world where the pandemic is concerned. Then 76% drop in inbound travel is estimated overall in the Middle East. The global pandemics has been less severe across Africa. However, South Africa is another worse case scenario.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the situation of all continents is different due to their regional handling and impact of the COVID spread. There has to be hope somewhere. Which areas will you think recovery is going to be the quickest? It's a tough one, I know.
No. To me, it's very easy. It's very clear to me. Now we have to distinguish between two things, how to do it and what to do. Now, how to do it is the problem, because so far we've been only measuring international travel as travel. Don't even count domestic tourism. If that happens with China, China would have been completely closed by now. But China was able to bring in its own domestic market to keep its jobs alive and to keep its business alive. Now, I know some countries don't have enough masses to be able to sustain their own domestic tourism. They need to depend on international tourism, definitely. But even that, we're not measuring what's happening inside the country. We haven't tried that. I completely believe it's a matter of principle to me, not just a matter of need. A country that's not enjoyed and traveled by its own people cannot and should not be enjoyed by anybody else from outside that country. It's a matter of principle. We should have realized this before. It's one of the lessons we learned out of this COVID-19 crisis. Now, having said this, each region would recover in a different way, that's for sure. Depends how much this region would cooperate with each other. For example, even Europe is not cooperating with each other. The European Union, you can't travel now from Amin, Malaga. I can't go to Madrid even, believe it or not, because there are different regulations in Madrid region than in Andalusia region, let alone traveling to France or to Italy. I think these countries governments have to get together and decide. This is what they want to do. They need to, for example.
Can European Union play a key role here? Right?
Yes, of course.
That's
of course.
one big block.
Of course. I'm taking Europe as an example.
Yeah.
It could be any other, in the Arab world, Africa, South America, North America. Even each state is working. It's not the United States anymore. States, 52, 53 states, each working on its own, unfortunately. So what we need to do now is make sure that these countries work together and then set the regulations. For example, you can say you can only travel with a passport of vaccination, or you can only travel from one place to another if you're tested 72 hours before that. You can't have a country like the UK saying if you come to the UK, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. That doesn't work anymore. Quarantining doesn't work, definitely. But before we make any judgment, we have to make sure that when people travel to the UK or through the UK, they know exactly what's going on. The dissemination of information is very important. Now each traveler is doing their own homework by going on the internet, trying to find out which countries are saying what. That's confusing. Confusing for consumers, confusing for the industry, confusing for airlines as well.
Right. So one of the more evident trends or a positive gift of the pandemic is the artificial digitization and artificial intelligence. That's a new buzzword word, but it presents one of the greatest leadership challenges of our times. In one of the surveys that took place, 44% of the respondents say their company's bottom line will suffer if they don't adopt AI. But true transformation will need to start from the top. In addition to that, I want to just touch on the MICE events will take longer time to return to their conventional form with hybrid events, because that's where digitization and artificial intelligence is being perhaps utilized the most at the moment, because your normal face-to-face meetings have all gone online, and are these hybrid or online events or webinars, which are a mix of physical and virtual meetings, becoming more prevalent. Long lead times in event planning, restriction on event sizes, and constraint on travel budgets will mean that they are here to remain as a feature for immediate post-pandemic environment. I don't even want to think about what's going to happen to these mammoth buildings, the convention centers around the world. But some say the worst hit is the business tourism. Will digitization wipe off face-to-face meetings? How would digitization affect the industry altogether?
Thank you. Digitalization is one of the very important factors in this crisis, for sure. But it won't wipe out any sector, not even the business sector. Now we're not going to go directly into face-to-face meetings, 100% like we had before. We're going to start with a hybrid one. I was in Seville, for example, last week. There was a hybrid conference, but this hybrid conference was in the convention center. The convention center had 300, 400 people. It could have taken 2,000 people. It's only 400 people, but the rest were coming in online. But there was a chance for people to meet and interact. You could start building like that and then increasing the numbers as we go along, because you need to keep some distance. You need to make sure the crowds are not so interacting with each other that much. Things are not going to go back to normal. There's a new norm now, for sure. But that's only on the business part. The business part will recover. To cover first as hybrid, and then it will go back to what it was. Slowly, very slowly. Once the vaccine starts proving itself, once people start feeling more comfortable being together. But more important is the impact of digitalization.
What is the sense you are getting when you are talking to business leaders, because you are so representing so many organizations, is this a positive change? Is this something that we can embrace and we don't need to be afraid of?
We shouldn't be afraid of. Of course, it's a positive change, because it does lessen crowdedness, and it does deal with the issue of over-tourism. It's much better like this. Now you go to restaurants. I'm ready to go to a restaurant that's outdoors, not a restaurant that's indoors. A restaurant that has spacing between tables. I'm ready to do that. So these are things that are going to slowly now build up until we go back to the old norms. It won't happen in one night. But digitalization, just to go back to it, altogether has affected the industry, not just in the meeting sector. It affected the industry also in personal occasions. For example, look at when we had these concerts from Italy or something like that. Right. Big gatherings are being done now virtually.
Right.
You have Bocelli, for example, singing for the whole world.
Yeah.
Look at how Biden was inaugurated.
So it's
and so on and so forth.
In a way.
Yes.
More accessibility, yes. More
affordable. Yes.
More convenient.
Exactly. And even personal occasions. I did tell you once before. I have my daughter living in Dubai, where you are now. She got married via internet. She got married via Zoom. Even a personal occasion like this had to be done virtually. I was sitting with the father of the groom in Jordan. She was sitting with her husband in Dubai, and the priest on the third line. We conducted it. So people will have to start thinking differently from now on. So not just businesses, everything is going to be changing. You have to be imagined to think outside of the box, how to engage more people. Here you and I are talking to each other virtually now.
Yeah.
Of course, I would have loved to be there, to see you in person, but I know I can't.
Yeah.
Not now, at least. Until we do that, we have to utilize the technology to its best.
So we need to.
It's an opportunity for us.
All calm down and embrace the new norm, you are saying. We need to.
That's right. That's right.
Be positive about it. We look for the positive, but that's human nature as well. This is human business, like you said, So human nature is to seek out the positives, out of this rubble, this. So this is the new norm, and there are positives in there.
2021 is the year where we have to experience this transition from the old norm to the new norm. I believe by the end of 2021, we will get to a point where we could start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Many people don't see it now yet because they're depending too much on the vaccine. I think there is an over-dependency on the vaccine. Vaccine is good news, but it's not tested yet. It's not proven itself yet, and it's not trusted by many people yet. So we can't just jump into things. We need 2021 to do all this testing. I think we've learned so many lessons. But 2021 is the year to implement these lessons and try to see how we can make it better, because the world is a better place, without doubt.
So let's move on to another topic. The tourism sector
Please.
is a complex system, one that includes industries of transport, building and construction, and food and waste management, among others. Tourism sector produces an estimated 75% of all emissions. The transportation sector in tourism produces 75% of all emissions of the sector, contributing to 5% of all man-made emissions and over 20% of all transport-related emissions. But then emissions are generated from other parts of the tourism sector as well, including building, operating hotels, food production, tourism-related waste management, and service sector, which are more difficult to quantify and measure. How must sustainability be addressed? Is this an opportunity, specifically in the next 10 years of the tourism agenda, with the US back into the Paris
Agreement?
What role can rich nations play? Is this enough? Needs more.
Okay. Let's first of all distinguish between two things: climate change and sustainability. Sustainability is by far much more encompassing concept. Sustainability is not just about the environment, although the environment is a critical part of it. Sustainability has environmental, social, and economics. So I think what we should look at here is sustainability. Sustainability to me means sustaining life on this earth. Sustaining life on earth does not mean not to progress, does not mean not to grow at all. It means we should grow in a sustainable way, because we cannot just stay where we are. We have to keep moving on. And sustainability is a way of doing that. For example, look at Venice or New York. Who said that New York was nicer? Manhattan was nicer before New York was built? Or Venice, was it nicer before it was built? As a nature thing. We have to have the guts to do things and do them right. Not every skyscraper is a problem, but how to build it and where to build it. That's the point. So sustainability is not just about the environment. Sustainability is about social and economic sustainability. Social sustainability is very important to me. It's a relationship between the local community and the tourists. We can't just keep treating tourists as if they're God, coming from Earth, with blue eyes and blonde hair, coming to visit us. We dedicate all our energy for them and their service. They must interact with the local community. They must have some kind of interest there. They must spend some money in the local community, not to stay in resorts. All exclusive resorts will become outdated from now on, because all inclusive resorts Means people are coming from outside, staying in a certain place. They don't leave that place at all. They eat, they drink, they enjoy their time, they entertain in that place. They don't go out and see the real world, real community. Now, of course, the community has jobs. We provided by that resort, that's for sure. But these jobs are not going to be sustained because nobody is going to be wanting to spend the rest of their lives trying to serve the rich people of the world, to go back to their homes, find out how poor they are, how rich are the people that they serve. What you need to do is create jobs at the local communities. The only way to create jobs at the local community is to have the tourists go to the community and spend money there, make some lunches there, make some handicrafts there. That's how people will get more self-made jobs. That's the only way to sustain tourism as an industry, to sustain life. So sustainability is not just about the environment. But speaking of the environment, of course, it has benefited a lot. Look at Kenya, for example. Kenya has been able to double its rhino population the last 6 months, 7 months, because nobody's traveling to Kenya internationally. So, yes, we've started to see some symptoms in the environment that we have not seen before. We need to keep that, we need to preserve it and cherish it by making less people go to certain places. Make it more of longer stays than more people. That's why I'm very, very attracted by the concept of digital nomads. Digital nomads are people that can travel from one place to another to stay for longer periods of time and work from a distance. So that's another symptom that digitalization has provided us. Okay. What we can do, Sumaira, now is instead of having 10 people coming in one day, we have one person staying for 10 days. That's much better.
That's a very good measure that you very good advice. Yeah. So, which brings me, is this a new world order we are talking about? What are the opportunities for countries to keep their tourism industry developed? Which destinations do you expect to come to the fore who will overcome the challenges of the pandemic before the others?
There's definitely a new world order. It's a better order. It's an order that would make us think differently. We have changed as people, as human beings now. We have changed altogether in our relationship with our families, with our, yes. Now, the more destinations that would win in this regard are the destinations that think imaginatively outside of the box, adapt more quickly, and try to adjust their policy to the new norms. For example, if you want to attract digital nomads, which is one of the ways of attracting international tourists, you have to advertise for them. You have to solve their visa problems. They can't just stay for a week or two, they stay for a month or 2 or 3. You have to solve their tax problems. So you have to be imaginative, think outside of the box. If you want to do domestic tourism, which is a new norm, you have to think differently. You can't advertise in English for a country that speaks Swahili, for example. You have to advertise in their own language. You have to cater for their own people, for your own culture. So there are so many changes that needs for destinations to become more successful. I think that some of the island destinations will be the first to recover because they can contain things better. And they can create these corridors, bubbles and corridors. One bubble here, one bubble there, and a corridor. That's a way of doing it now. But otherwise, we have to prepare ourselves for a new world without doubt. 2021 is the year to prepare ourselves, and the results will start showing 2022, 23, and 24. Only if we succeed. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So in your past roles, you've really dealt with almost working with political organization dealing with states and countries as members, as member states. But you are also an individual and you're also a leader. And you perhaps have dealt with many crises in your past professional career. What is your advice as a tourism leader from one tourism leader to another, to an individual who's running a small business, how can they safeguard? How, and what are the measures they can apply to their business to insulate them against the currents of the pandemic, as one leader to another, as
Okay.
a business owner?
Okay. Now, unfortunately, the game is in the hands of governments, not the private sector. So it's governments we have to talk to. As a former UNWTO Secretary General, I used to work with governments. I saw so many crises. One of the ABCs of dealing with any crisis is to bring governments together. Tell them, sit on the table, you're not going to leave this room. I literally did that. So you're not going to leave this room until you agree on something in common, no matter what this is. But you have to agree on something. This is the leadership that we're now seeking in the international multilateral system. As for the private sector now, the private sector has very little options to do. They're so dependent on governments now. But they can think outside of the box. They can be more flexible. They can be more adjustable. For example, when a private sector tries to attract digital nomads, a hotel must think of not rates for a night or two, but rates for a month or two, so on and so forth. Packages will have to be designed in a different way. Tour operators will have to look at the thing in a different way. The role of tour operators is changing altogether. Tour operators must ensure that you leave your home and come back to your home in a safe way. Insurance, for example. You know, in Jamaica, they have something called Jamaica Cares, which is a policy that you buy for going to Jamaica. This policy is directed specifically to COVID. If anything happens, God forbids, when you are there, you're either treated there or you have the option of repatriated. At least you travel with a peace of mind. So you have to be imaginative about it. It's a private sector insurance companies, local insurance companies in conjunction with governments. Private and public sector must work together now. If the private sector does not have its voice reach the governments will not be able to do the right thing. They're only doing now what is done to protect their own people. They're not interested now. Nobody's yet got into the stage of having to balance out life with quality of life, health with economy. Nobody's balancing that out yet. And so only the private sector can do that together with government.
Okay. So you think it's the role of you think it is the role of the governments, which is paramount, more than individuals at this time of crisis. But then, what about organizations like ours, or UNWTO, or WTTC? Do we still have a role to play? And
Yes.
so, and how and why? How can we stay relevant?
We have to bring the governments together. We have to call for meetings. We have to call for conferences. We have to intensify our work. We have to cry out loud like I'm doing now. Tell governments, look, you can't make it on your own. Your success is not being built on what you do internally alone. Your success is going to be dependent on how you work with others. Because without working with others, this industry of ours is so interconnected. You can't have one country doing a perfect thing and another country next to it doing a bad job. That doesn't work. So they have to be convinced that working together is the basic principle to build our future recovery.
You were Secretary General for UNWTO for its most progressive decade. And some would even say that under your leadership, the organization became most relevant. Now it's our honor to have you as SG for World Tourism Forum Institute, a grand opportunity to redefine and reset the world tourism agenda. What is your vision for this?
Thank you so much. I'm humbled by what you said. Thank you so much. That's exactly why I decided to join the World Tourism Forum Institute, because I believe there's an opportunity there. Now, the vision is, let's make membership here. Let us go to each region by region. Europe, for example, we have a chance to bring Europe together. Central Asia, we can bring it together. Africa, we can get together. We can do that in the name of this organization. We can hold meetings. We could travel to these countries, could convince the important people there. You know, it's not just the ministers of tourism, but it's the heads of states and heads of governments that have to be convinced about this. I remember when I was in UNWTO, I worked with WTTC on a program called the Open Letter. This open letter was carried by both me and the head of CEO of WTTC to each head of government and head of, because I believe that they are the ones that have the final say, the power. They have to be convinced that this is an important sector. Now more than ever, they're convinced about it because it's the one sector suffering most. They lost their jobs there. So it's an opportunity for us to go and address heads of states and heads of governments, tell them, look, you want this sector to come back? This is the way to do it. You want the sector to come back? It's important because you are going to be losing so many jobs if you don't. They will listen to. Just like what happened during, you remember in 10 years ago when we had the Icelandic ashes.
Right.
We had the entire Europe locked down when it came to travel for 3-4 days, for a whole week. The whole world suffered from that. Imagine now, it's 100 times even bigger than that. So the value of travel is being shown and demonstrated very clearly. It's a job easier done now than it used to be done before, to convince heads of states of the importance of this sector. This sector is not taken too seriously by so many people.
So what you're saying is the pandemic actually paves the way and is opening the door further. You know, it makes our job a little bit easier. It's not going to be that hard to convince the governments to come together.
No, not at all. When it comes to travel and tourism, you know, tourism is not taken seriously by most of the people.
Yeah.
You know, when I was Minister of Tourism in my own country in Jordan, I was to say that the Minister of Tourism, a very lonely minister, because nobody listens to you, nobody takes you seriously. Now is the time to reverse this by addressing heads of state, heads of government, and telling them this is important now. It's what you need to do.
Okay, all right. I can just keep on talking to you the whole day. It's your words are like pearls of wisdom for me. However, we've come to the end of our discussions. It is clear from our discussions that although the situation of the pandemic makes tourism highly vulnerable, the sector is also, I think what is coming out is in a unique position to contribute to broader, not just recovery plans and actions, but a broader recovery of the economic sector of the world. All over the world, tourism represents development opportunities, promotes solidarity and understanding beyond borders, while domestic tourism also helps to foster cohesion within the nations. So what is clear from our discussions is that governments have a huge role to play, and organizations are like ours can really, really help to be that binder to bring these governments together on the same platform to foster and to help tourism and travel recover quicker. Besides, the sector plays a crucial role in leveraging efforts to preserve and promote natural and cultural heritage and sustainability and climate change. All this makes leadership in the global tourism sector even more crucial, both in this moment of crisis and when societies will enter the recovery phase. And for that, we appreciate your wisdom and vision, Dr. Taleb. It was
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Sumaira.
Thank you.
Summed it up very, very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being on our platform.
Definitely. Anytime.
Looking forward to working with you to...
We're going to do it. We're going to do it together.
We will do it.
We'll do it together.